All right. Good morning, everybody. How's everyone doing today? Awesome. Hello to all our fam out there on Twitch. My name is Tracy. I am so excited that you guys are here today, and I'm sure you guys are more excited because we are bringing out here this incredible graduate, recording arts grad from 2007, who's a senior sound designer. I'm sure his titles speak for himself. Let's give it up, everybody, for Joshua Davidson. Big round of applause.
Hey, testing. How's it going, everyone? First of all, I have to thank Full Sail for having me out here. This is super cool. This whole presentation area is freaking amazing. You guys have a lot to be proud of. I'm excited. It's been a hell of a year coming out, getting Borderlands out the door and everything like that. Before I get started, actually, I'm really curious, how many people are here from like recording arts and music or music production degree? What about like game development? Okay, like film? Got some film. Digital media. Awesome. It's a nice diverse crowd. That's really cool. Before I get started, I have to give a shout out to everyone at Gearbox back in Frisco, Texas. I'm standing on the shoulders of some amazing talent, some amazing giants of talent, and like they are back home just being around all this talent and artistic, creative people like that. They are super inspiring to be around every single day. Let's go ahead and get started. Just a little bit about me. I am Joshua Davidson. I was born and raised in Macon, Georgia, and I graduated in 2007 with an associate's in recording arts. I started my career in game development back in 2007. I got pretty lucky, like right out of school, I got a job at the job at Volition, and I started working on Saints Row 2 and Red Faction Guerrilla. So those were my first two titles. I spent the first 2 years in the industry working on that as pretty much like a junior sound designer. I also received some additional music composition credits for those games. I actually did some fat beats for Saints Row, and I did some original score for Red Faction Guerrilla, rather. Starting work at Gearbox in July of 2009, it was like exactly 2 years after starting my job at Volition. I started working at Gearbox, and at that time I was like, this is a really big company. It was not a very big company. I mean, less than 200 people were working there, and it was only 3 audio guys. It was Rayson, Mark, and myself, and I spent about a month or two helping finish Borderlands 1, and I didn't really put original content into that game. I like just kind of helped finish off, polish some bugs off, and things like that. And I started doing original content for Gearbox pretty much immediately as soon as we started doing the DLC packs for them. But I had no idea, like, signing up for a job at Gearbox, I thought Borderlands was a really cool game. I had no idea that I was like hitching my wagon to such a crazy popular game that was going to be coming out. So it was like a sleeper hit, as they call it in the industry. It basically like kept selling just a little bit every month, and it just kept doing that. Usually games have that like big sales spike and then just drops off. Like Borderlands just kind of kept going. Over the next 3 years, we'd get the sales reports, and it would just be like, yeah, it's still good, still doing good. So that was a really cool feeling. And then I think it was between 2009 to 2012 we had sold 6 million copies of just the first game alone. This is the audio team back in 2009 to 2010. Mark Petty was our audio director. Rayson Varner, you've probably heard a lot of his music in the Borderlands games. He's helped craft the sound and music of Borderlands since the very beginning. So if you really appreciate the music, like he's sort of the artistic vision behind that. Andrew Chaney came on board a little bit after me, about 6 months after me, and he was my audio lead on an unannounced project that never got out the door, unfortunately. I was just a sound designer, and I was actually showing Brian this slide, and he was like, "Oh, everybody's a lead except for you in this slide." So I was just in my junior stage, pretty much like shifting into the mid-level sound designer. So it's like junior, mid, senior, leads, etc. That was a really cool time. This is a picture of the old building that we were in Plano, Texas. So this is a big 13-story Bank of America building, which was incredibly understated for where we were. Like it doesn't say Gearbox on the side of the side of the building or anything like that. We were at the top 3 or 4 floors of this building, and it was like an office space that we just kind of retrofitted to be like a game development studio. It was not a game development studio that we built from the ground up. So we kind of like we put our own essence into the whole office, but like over the course of the few years we were being there, we were like, we need to build our own new building here. And that picture in the middle right there, that was my old office at that building. So yeah, it was a pretty modest setup, actually. A lot of this stuff is pretty much home bedroom kind of like stuff that you can buy for a few grand. Like it's still a 5.1 setup and everything, and the acoustic treatment and everything is still pretty nice. But it didn't feel like we were like at this point when we were still working on Borderlands 1 and 2. It didn't feel like we were this full like audio production facility quite yet. We were just kind of like, because all of our rooms were just spread out all across this building. And so it was hard to like communicate, and we actually didn't have any sort of like room to record things in. So we didn't record as much as we wanted to. Like it would have to be a whole day had to get set aside to do any sort of original source recording and stuff. But that changed. Oh, look at that little clipped off there. But this is the new building in Frisco, Texas. We had a move-in date of October 2015, and yeah, like we built this building here from the ground up to be a game development studio, which is really cool. Like it feels a lot better. And as a result, also new audio offices came with it. So we actually hired an acoustician, Kevin. He helped us build these rooms. He had just been hot off the heels of building a new studio for Green Day. And what I've circled here is all of our control rooms. This is supposed to be a laser pointer. Yeah, so this is all of our control rooms right here. In the middle, this is a VO booth. You can't really see it. And then here is our live Foley room. And all of these control rooms can talk to each other. And this VO room, we can record this VO room from any of these rooms. We can record in the live room here from any of these rooms. And we have video cameras projecting inside so we can see who's recording. And we have television screens inside of our room so we can communicate that way. It's become a very cool process. It feels like, we're like a real production facility now. So this is actually what the rooms look like when we came and saw them for the first time in the building. There's no acoustic treatment here yet, but as you see, as we start to build this out, we're getting acoustic treatment set up on the walls. This is a cloth, and inside of that cloth is this foam batting. The foam batting actually creates a little bit more, like it creates the acoustic dampening that we need. But we put cloth and acoustic dampening material all on the ceiling, all over the sides of the walls. So if you touch my wall in my room, it's actually just completely made out of fabric. So we put the racing stripe kind of red thing in the middle here. This is my desk coming in. And then I'm starting to get my equipment in. You can see it's starting to fill out just a little bit more. And you can see, oh, we get more foam on the wall. The cloth isn't quite up quite yet. But what's really funny is I actually started working at this point, like when it wasn't quite done yet. And then this is the final product here. And we have 6 of these. We call them control rooms. Sometimes they're called like sound design suites. You can use that interchangingly, So yeah, we have 6 of them, which is like a miracle. Like the fact that they let us build 6 of these control rooms inside of this building. This is the console that we went with. We decided to shift from Pro Tools to Yamaha Nuage, and Yamaha Nuage is pretty much just a new Windows specific control surface. So we switched to a new window because we noticed that it was having a lot more of a game audio centric sort of capability compared to Pro Tools, and there's a lot of like interesting features like batch exporting with cycle markers and things like that help deal with tons of file names and stuff like that being able to be exported at the same time. So yeah, this is another picture of my desk here, and yeah, the final product once again. So yeah, let's fast forward here. This is where we're at now. So 10 years later, we have 13 audio staff, and you can see there's actually a lot of like, it's not just all sound designers. We have music supervisors, voice supervisors. I should have put Rayson. Rayson's also a composer. Mark Petty's our audio director. Brian Fieser, senior lead sound designer. These guys down here are Gearbox Studio Quebec. That's what that stands for. So Gearbox basically opened up a new studio not too long ago in Canada. And so we have a Canadian studio now. And at first I was like, why are we doing this? This is so weird. But we've hired three awesome sound designers up there, and they're super talented and amazing, and they're great partners to have. And actually, they did the, I don't know if y'all played the new Borderlands 2 DLC that came out earlier this year. Gearbox Studio Quebec did all of that. So they're They did a hell of a job. They're super talented. I think it's mostly just senior level talent that we scooped up there. So very lucky that we have them on our side. Oh yeah, actually, I'm just kidding. We have 14 audio staff. This is Tim Mambrino, is our associate sound designer. He's a super awesome guy. We just hired him this past month. What I really love about, the reason I wanted to highlight him is this is actually a gig that we put out, we put a posting out online and everything, and he was, it was a posting for, we didn't expect you to have any experience, and I know that a lot of game, like you'll see a bunch of game jobs, for example, they ask for experience, and you're like, how am I going to get experience? Like, none of these jobs ask for no experience. Well, I'm very happy that we were able to put out a job that asked for no experience, but we still got a guy that had a little bit of experience, and that was Tim. But yeah, I feel like in the future we should definitely be trying to reach out to and get you guys more opportunities in the future with limited experience, but high, like you just have a lot of passion, and we can see a lot of like growth potential in you. Let's see here. All right, cool, yeah. So the new building, like I said, it's a big full-service audio production facility. This is the first time we had such ease and convenience to record things, and we did. We recorded a lot of things, but we didn't just record the audio for those things. We recorded video of us doing these things, and we started to have these monthly cycle review meetings where basically the whole company would watch these cycle review meetings, and we would show off like what we've been doing over the past month. And audio started to put out our videos, and you know, like audio always feels like an underappreciated art form inside of game development, and to do these videos actually made people in our own building start to appreciate us more and be like, we love seeing y'all's videos. So here's actually a little highlight reel of some of that. Davidson. He's a lot bigger now, but and he still burps all the time. So I probably have some more to show. Thank you. So yeah, next up, this is actually a early prototype video of the Ratches. This is like one of the few creatures we actually did sound design for in-house. They were like, they came on really early, but a lot of the creatures came on kind of late, so we actually outsourced a lot of the creature audio to our partners Formosa in Los Angeles. So they do a lot of game audio outsourcing and stuff, and they do some pretty cool work. But this is me and Rayson. We went into the vocal booth, and Rayson had this idea of like, let's like screech and yell into the microphone and try to come up with some cool Ratch sounds. And I was like, all right, I wasn't very good at it. He was a lot better at it, so we ended up using mostly his voice. But we ended up doing like some Foley for their footsteps and things like that. And we did the Foley and footsteps, and then we took our voices, and then we started putting layering them with pig sounds and horses and things like that to kind of give them an original palette. So what I'm about to show you is just our prototype of that. So this is kind of like what that looked like. So yeah, that was just two videos of the same thing, but just different sounds that we tried out. So yeah, my game sound philosophy is basically just practicality meets high quality. I definitely have been a very big gearhead in the past, and I've wanted to collect all the gear, and I've always told myself, well, if I could just get this piece of gear, I'll get better at sound. If it's easy to fall into that trap. I've definitely been there several times in my life, especially when I started doing photography. I was like, I need all these lenses. That's the only way I'm going to get good at this. Once I feel like I have the right tools for what I need, it's really rare that I add a new plugin to my arsenal. It's actually a monumental event whenever I download a new plugin, pretty much. So finding things that are really fast, easy to use, and reliable, that you can just go to in a fast-paced production environment is what matters the most to me. And during downtime and pre-production, that's definitely when I start to look for new plugins and stuff. So probably in the next year, I'll probably get a little bit more plug-in hungry and looking for new microphones. We have a really good microphone arsenal already at work, so things like that are definitely something I think about once we kind of ramp off of projects and stuff. But right now we're still doing DLC stuff, so not quite there yet. So yeah, it's important to also find key features to use in the next project or the next project we're going to use, the next project that we're going to do. So custom recording sessions, when we were doing Borderlands 3, we knew that we were going to do sliding and mantling and things like that. So we went ahead and started doing recording sessions for things like that. And no, we did not steal that from Apex Legends, despite popular belief. All right. So these are not all the plugins I use and software that I use, but these are kind of the ones I just go to all the time. Obviously, Nuendo is our DAW of choice. The FabFilter Mix bundle is it's a little bit pricey just to get $300 or $400 probably, but they're such a good company. The plugins are so great that I highly recommend them if you can swing it. They also don't use any iLok services, and I don't really like iLok. I feel like you're punishing your customer if you're making me put it on an iLok and stuff. For creative sample mangling, I love Reactor Ensemble's Form and S layer. You'll actually see that coming up here in some other videos. And synth design, I am obsessed with Serum currently by Xfer Records. It's actually pretty affordable. You can actually get Serum on a rent-to-own plan on the website splice.com. So you can pay $10 a month and then just pay it off over the next 12 months if you want to. It's $120 if you just buy it outright. So pretty cool plan that they have going there. So we use, our engines are Wise. We use, if you're interested in getting into game audio, this is the one to learn. Whoa, whoops. That's not a laser pointer. This is the one to use. It is basically like a DAW/database for game audio. And It's free to download, actually. You can just download it, and you don't have to pay any money for it. The only time you have to pay for it is if you're actually using it in a game that's going to come out. So, and we port all of our Wise content into an Unreal Engine, Unreal 4. So we used to be on the Unreal Engine 3 and up until 2015 or 2016, and then we switched to Unreal 4 around that time. And Borderlands 3 was made completely in Unreal 4. So. Yeah, so the Borderlands 3 weapon audio system is sort of the meat and potatoes of like the sound of Borderlands. They are the characters and the guns more than probably the characters themselves. And we kind of like sat down and we thought like, how are we going to change the weapon audio in this game? Like from previous titles, we would just have like, if you picked up a Jacob's pistol, it just sounded like a Jacob's pistol, but we never piggybacked onto that procedurally generated modular system that art and design use. So this next video will be a deep dive about how I use this new procedurally generated weapon audio system for the Maliwan snipers.
It's not exactly a mystery to anyone that has ever played a Borderlands game that the game has a lot of guns. Throughout the history of the franchise, artists, designers, programmers, and animators have had a field day creating wild variations of weaponry using the engine's procedurally generated system that carefully combines different parts, assets, and design attributes together to create unique loot that scales upward as you progress through the game. There's a pretty interesting secret to that sauce, and if you're interested, I'm going to tell you how that sauce is made. Well, for audio anyway. You see, on all the previous Borderlands titles, we had the usual manufacturers: Jacobs shotguns, Maliwan SMGs, Dahl assault rifles, etc. And all those different guns utilized a modular system that slapped together all different parts that gave you unique item drops you found scattered across Pandora. But the audio in the games didn't behave the same way as the art and the design at all. Not even close, actually. You see, if you picked up a Jacobs pistol, it just sounded like a Jacobs pistol. No matter what parts, common or rare, each gun type in the game got about 15 individual sounds assigned to it. There were 5 randomized firing sounds for when you immediately pull the trigger, 5 different sounds that follow the initial firing sound, and 5 variations of tails. Collectively, we shipped about 350 total gun sounds on Borderlands 2, and that number includes the reload sounds. But on Borderlands 3, we shipped about 5,500 individual gunshot sounds and reloads. So wait, how did that happen? Well, the easy answer might be, we just have more memory. Borderlands 1 and 2 were shipped on Xbox 360 and PS3. We just didn't have the memory budget to pull that off. But more than just memory, we completely changed the way we design and implement our gun audio. And thanks to the creative superpowers of lead sound designer Brian Fieser and the sheer technical prowess of audio programmer Julian Peterson, we were able to build a robust modular weapon audio system for the guns. The same part system that design and art had been using for years, we were now able to piggyback on, and thus the experimentation began. Okay, maybe that didn't make it into the final game. I know some of you are disappointed. I'm going to show you how I personally approached my work for this system using the Maliwan sniper rifles I sound designed. The design philosophy behind Maliwan weapons are their distinct laser and plasma-based projectiles that often come with elemental attributes. They're the most futuristic and sci-fi out of all the Borderlands guns, so they need something much different than the guns that heavily rely on organic gun source. Let's take a closer look by opening the weapon debug screen. When we want to spawn a specific type of weapon and its rarity, this is where we go to get it done quick. I'll start by navigating the menus and selecting an uncommon Maliwan sniper rifle. Then the next screen I'm taken to will show me every available part for this weapon. As you can see, there's quite a bit here. Thanks to the new weapon system, we are finally able to put individual gun firing sounds on any of these parts. You're probably thinking, this is insanely overwhelming, and why on earth would you want to do this? You guys are psychos. There's just so many parts here. How could putting a sound on each individual part possibly sound good? Well, you'd be right to assume it probably wouldn't sound good, and we didn't actually put a sound on each part. But we did put them on a lot of parts that we felt like mattered the most. For example, in this row in the Weapon Builder debug tool, you can see the Maliwan snipers have 3 different types of barrel. Each barrel has 3 corresponding barrel mod attachments that alter the gun's appearance and attributes. The barrels change the type of projectile the Maliwans fire, while the mods typically change things like accuracy, reload speed, and damage. The barrel mods have more distinct characteristics that give the gun a more signature profile. Inside of Wise, we can see the hierarchy of different switch containers that house all the various audio for the parts. Whenever the gun firing event gets triggered engine side, our setup in Wise flips all the necessary switches so that only the proper sounds are chosen. So now that you know the gist of how the system works, let's head over to Nuendo, and I'll show you how my sound design process for a few of these parts works. I've been using the VST Kick 2 a lot over the past couple of years because sometimes it's just fun to use kick drums as a sub-layer inside of impacts. I also like this little trick to create quick lasers. Here's what one of the 808 kick drum templates sounds like raw. Yeah, definitely very reminiscent of an 808. So since Kick 2 allows you to shape the envelopes, watch what happens to the sound as I spike the second point on the graph, curving it upward. Now as I elongate and curve the third point, you'll start to hear that distinctive pew pew sound emerge. Pretty simple technique. I like simple techniques. But we can't use this kind of content by itself because it's sounding way too much just like a raw synthesizer. I did find, though, that using this technique helped me create suitable layers. I've also been playing around a lot in Serum the past few years, and I've been creating a small library of custom laser patches for helping me build layers for sci-fi weapons. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and get a little bit vulnerable here. Here's the first laser patch I ever saved in Serum. Yeah, it sounds corny as hell, but it was a start, and I derived many children from this patch, and by the time we hit several variations in, you can hear that they have a little bit more character. I also created more plasma burst style patches. These patches are best played in the lower octave on the piano roll to give them a more full rounded out transient. So after lots of layering and experimentation using the source from Kick 2, Serum, and some organic gunshots, here are some of the examples of what I came up with to use as my sounds for barrel mod parts. It took me a while to get to this point, but combining some choice layers from Kick 2, Serum, and layering them with distortion and organic source, it started to have the sound that I wanted. Something heavily synth designed, but not so synthy that it becomes completely disconnected from the environment when listening to it back in the game. Just to expedite this video up a little bit, here's a quick look at the rest of the sounds I had to make for the Maliwan sniper rifles. These all got built out over the course of a couple weeks and hooked onto the various gun parts like ornaments on a Christmas tree. Now let's spawn some guns with the weapon debug tool. I'll write up on the screen the individual audio files associated with each gun. Variety has increased a ton since Borderlands 2, and I've only scratched the surface here. If you're interested in an even deeper dive of this, keep your eyes peeled for our GDC talk coming up in 2020. The man behind the system itself, Brian Fieser, will be giving a really interesting talk about how all of this works. Also, as a little challenge, if you ever have two of the same type of gun in your backpack while playing through Borderlands 3, swap them out and take notice of how they might sound different from one another.
That's a small sample of how the weapon system works in the game, and thank you. Yeah, And just to just to be real with you guys, I worked in the system for a good month and a half or so on the Maliwan SMGs first, and I just totally sucked at it. Like, it was so hard to figure out how to get different parts to sound good together and things like that. But luckily, my team is very patient with me, and it was really cool about it all. So eventually, I started getting really used to it, and I started getting a lot better at it. So a big shout out to Brian Fieser and Julian Peterson for putting that system together. And if you really think that the weapons sound really good, it's really those guys did a lot of work on that. So yeah, next video here is how I designed the sounds for the Maliwan dropships.
The Maliwan dropships in Borderlands 3 were implemented using a simple sequence container inside of Unreal 4. Despite what meets the eye, they're not actually real vehicles, but more like a simple tram riding on an invisible track in the sky. Their main purpose is to spawn Maliwan enemy types into the game world. I was tasked with their sound design, and due to the simplicity of their implementation inside of Unreal, there weren't many places to hook up sounds outside of a simple loop and some one-shots. Now let's check out the new Windows session I used to create the audio. I wanted to get a nice cool sounding synth loop to use as the main layer of the engine that would be versatile enough to use for all situations. I took some synth source of a deep bass growl I had generated in Serum during pre-production and dropped it into the Native Instruments reactor ensemble known as Form. Form allowed me to use its granular and sub-oscillator capabilities to dial in a sound I liked that would make it easy to loop. Once I got the sound I was happy with, I printed the audio onto my print track, chopping up each sound into individual sections and exporting them into Wise. I prefer this method of creating one single looping audio file, well, because it's easier to me, but it also creates a little bit more variation of the sound inside of Wise. I'll show you what I mean. Here's the inside of our middleware audio project in Wise. Note this random container here, and all of the subsequent sound files of our Maliwan dropship engine inside of it. Each one of those sound files is about a second long. I have told this random container to continuously play them in a random pattern, crossfading each file into one another. Notice how seamless this loop sounds. And all I had to do was chop up my sound into 1-second bits and let Wise handle the rest. Really easy. Much easier than meticulously trying to create a single looping sound file, and adds a little more variation. Next up, I tied a simple RTPC to this loop. I decided to tie this RTPC to a pitch envelope to mimic the sound of a ship pitching upward as it gets faster and vice versa. And here's the loop implemented engine side, attached to the Maliwan dropship actor. To make the presentation feel more dynamic, I needed to create various one-shot swells. Here's a few pass-by sounds I cobbled together using my own synth source and other commercial library recordings of jet engines and sci-fi swells. I did the same things for landings and takeoffs. And just for good measure, here are some distant one-shots designed to create more ambient atmosphere in our maps. Now, let's hear how everything plays out together with a few examples from the final game.
around this big system. Yeah, they sound pretty huge in here. So yeah, that was just a quick video of how we did that. So one last little behind-the-scenes video here. This is about the mouthpiece boss fight. If you've played through this part of the game, this happens very early on, so hopefully no spoilers or anything. But this is specifically mostly about the speaker audio that we created.
One of the earliest boss battles in the development of Borderlands 3 was the fight that occurs at the Holy Broadcast Center with the character Mouthpiece. Mouthpiece's main fight mechanic involved an array of speakers aligned throughout the battle arena that charge up and let out an area of effect burst and damage anyone standing too close. The task to create these charges and bursts fell on my plate. I immediately thought, aesthetically, I would need some intense guitar and microphone feedback sounds to use as a layer. So I hit up Gearbox technical sound designer and guitar enthusiast Ricky Meisner to see if he had any recordings on hand of guitar feedback. Turns out Ricky had just recorded himself creating feedback sounds with his guitar, so he sent me over those recordings to use as a layer. I dropped his feedback sounds into my Nuendo session and got to layering and using pitch modulation to simulate the sound of the speakers charging up. Next, using some bass drops I generated using Serum sub-oscillator and some explosion source, I made a quick explosion sound to drop in to supplement the visuals of the speaker burst. After importing these sounds into Wise and Unreal, they were ready to get hooked up to the speakers, but not before I pinged audio programmer Julian Peterson to help me figure out a way to get the sounds to play one single voice from multiple locations. We want this to happen so we don't get loud clipping voice stacking calls by multiple files at the same time being triggered. Having one sound play across the entire speaker array is a much cleaner and performant way to go about this kind of audio implementation. After working out the logic for the Unreal blueprint with Julian, this is the configuration we came up with. And by we, I mean I had nothing to do with this. This was all Julian. Thank you, Julian. So anyway, here's how the first pass ended up sounding. Not bad, but I couldn't help but feel like there was something missing. So I went back into Nuendo and added a pitch modulator respace generated in Serum to the riser and the explosion. This added some extra character and fullness to it. After the sounds had been sitting in the game for a while, we wanted to make sure that the speakers always had your attention throughout the entire boss battle. This meant ducking music and other sounds so that their positionality in the world was very evident. So here's what the Mouthpiece speaker sounds like in-game with the final mix and everything going on.
Boss fight right there, but yeah, pretty cool. The composers, let's talk about some music stuff. So we had 4 composers contribute to the score of Borderlands 3, and each one of them took on the task of scoring one of the different planets. So like Michael McCann did Promethea, Jesper Kid did Eden 6, Finishing Move, Pandora, and Rayson Varner did spoilers, Necrotafea, which we haven't really talked about in media stuff. So yeah, so the thing about like all the stuff that we've been doing throughout the whole history of Borderlands is all about modularity. So like, as you saw with the weapon system, modular components coming together to create lots of variations of different sounds is the trajectory we're going on. So no matter what game we do in the future, I feel like we're just gonna keep making things more modular. So the same thing happens with the music system and explosions, and there's some other stuff as well. Similarly to how the weapon audio system works, we have a system that is basically like an internal Ableton Live session happening inside of the game. So it starts out with a simple concept, and that's just threat versus interest level. And interest is basically how many layers are playing at the same time. And then threat is derived from what we tell the enemies in the game, we assign a point value to them rather. We tell them basically like, depending on what point values are coming at you, we're going to start triggering different stems. And so we may have an ambient stem going, and then as soon as a few guys start showing up, you'll start to hear drum loops kick in and things like that. So in Borderlands 2, it was just 2 loops per map. So we just had an ambient piece and a combat piece, and then sometimes we have a boss piece, but it was a very binary sort of system. So it was like enough enemies are on screen to kick in the combat music, and it will always kick in on the beat, right? So we can set the beat in Wise, but it was very, very binary. So it's changed a lot. So this kind of gives you a little bit of an idea of the system structure that we have here. So section 0 is pretty much only ambient stuff, and then section 1 is combat. So we have as you can see in part 1 here, we have 8 different stems that are going on at the same time. So we told our composers to make us a bunch of music and send us a bunch of stems. So we ended up getting back a bunch of WAV files. So all these different parts come together to give you a much more varied sort of soundtrack presence in the game. And that's really cool. I think that we can definitely keep going with the system in the future, in future titles and stuff like that. So this is actually Julian created this video. This is an early music system prototype. This kind of shows off how the music system kind of works like in Ableton Live, almost like in a session view, like almost like you're doing a little bit of a DJ mix. He wrote this little music box song for it. And he falls off the world. So yeah, just some interesting points of data. I checked right before I came out here the folders. We have 4,769 individual WAV files for the music that were shipped to us, and from the various composers. So the shipping soundtrack that's going to be coming out soon, I don't have a date on that yet, but it's going to be about 6 hours long. And Pandora radio music is music, actually, if you see those little boom boxes in the game, that's all Gearbox employees' music. So like people who are in bands or just write music on the side. We actually had enough music writers in the company to bring the total amount of music up to 10 hours in the game. So five and a half hours of music probably just for Pandora radio or something like that. It's pretty crazy. And one more thing before Q&A. I have a small gift for you synth nerds. So I have 163 serum presets that I created during Borderlands 3 development. Feel free to take a picture of this slide if you like. All of those like laser sounds and power-up sounds and stuff like that, if you guys want to use them, they're all yours. They were all the same patches I used throughout all of the development of Borderlands. And I'm actually surprised I had that many. I thought I only had like a few dozen or something like that. So yeah, thank you. Thank you. Q&A time? I think there's a microphone right up there.
Hey, Josh. Great talk.
Thank you.
So I really love the video that you showed of all the different Foley work that you guys did in your studio there. What was probably the most useful individual sound that you ended up recording in that studio space?
That's hard to pin down. I don't know. We did do like the sliding and mantling stuff is probably one of the more useful things. Obviously, that like is something that you do all the time throughout the game.
Metal too, but like with the wine bottle going in and out, those other little sounds going in and out of those.
Yeah, those are Iron Bear. That ended up being Iron Bear's like grenade shots and stuff like that. It's hard to pin down like what would be the #1 thing because it's so spread out. And I wish actually I could have sat up here and shown you hours of footage like that because we recorded so much of it. It was hard to actually pick for this presentation. So yeah.
And the only other question on that front is, what would you recommend to students who are not currently sound designers, or maybe they're music students or otherwise, and they want to start practicing it? What are some things that you did early on to kind of get into that mentality?
Yeah, so actually, I've told this story a number of times in previous talks, but How I got the job at Volition is they were looking for someone who demonstrated like sound design capability. And even though I had never worked on a game before, they wanted to see like, hey, does this person know game audio principles? I was mostly into music and doing music stuff, so at that time I was just sort of like faking it till I make it whenever I submitted my demo for them. And the demo that I did, what I did is you take what we typically like to see people do is take some footage from another game or a game in general and strip the audio out of it completely, and just for like 45 seconds to a minute long, that's all it has to be, do all of your own sounds for it. Do it in a DAW, and then use that as your demo reel, because it's hard to get like AAA game experience if you've never done it, right? But like if you show that you understand how this works, just in a linear format, we get it. We understand that you know game audio principles well enough that like we can trust you, to tire you and stuff like that.
Hey, thanks for doing this. I wanted to know what you used to make the sounds of the Rampager. Especially the third phase. Those are so crazy.
That was Rayson Varner who did that. I actually have no idea what he did, but it does sound really cool. I think he did a lot of layering with distortion to get that really, really harsh tonality to it. Rayson's sort of creature philosophy is like the creatures of Borderlands have to have that kind of harshness to them, and it definitely makes it feel more visceral. So I don't think I could tell you, like, other than that, what he did. There's so many people that work on the project, and we all have different things that we do, for sure.
Right, and also one thing I noticed as playing in the game, I noticed that like sounds get like really quiet when you're like not looking at them. Mm-hmm. How is that done? We have Wise has something called HDR and high dynamic range audio. So if things get really quiet in the game, basically the system automatically knows to bring that stuff up. And basically, like, whenever it's based on loudness. So if a grenade goes off, it will basically, Wise will see that where the peak transient in the game currently is and redirect the mix focus to that. It's not perfect, but it kind of gets us in the ballpark, basically, like, stuff like that. So. Hey.
Hello, Josh. It's me, Tracy.
Hey.
Somebody from our Twitch is asking how or even who did the doll sounds. They are absolutely fantastic.
That was Brian Fieser.
There you go. EP and A Night.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Morning.
Hey.
So I just had some questions about the Hellwalker shotgun.
Okay.
Was that all made in-house, or were there actually samples from Mick Gordon?
No, that was actually our technical sound designer, Ricky Meisner. He did that, and what's really cool about the Hellwalker is he did that all himself, and he managed to make it sound like, for those of you who don't know, it's basically like our Doom gun in the game, and every time you pull the trigger, it makes like a metal riff sound, and it actually sounds freaking amazing. And we actually have a system in the back end for all of our guns that the guns are triggered on a MIDI clock. So that's how that we get very precise timing and with all of our guns. And the Hellwalker is a good example of that because it's musical timing essentially. And what better to do musical timing than MIDI at this point,
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah.
So I've noticed playing the game that a lot of the grenades and torque sounds sound kind of like a firework popping going off. So what was like the original sound that was used for a lot of those, and how did you kind of manipulate it to kind of sound more in that area? I
think that actually it's kind of funny. There's a lot of different layers that go into that. I didn't actually work on those, but I remember Brian, I think, using a lot of like sort of things like explosion commercial library recordings, and even like things that we did in our Foley room, like balloon pops and things like that. I don't know exactly what his session looked like totally, so I couldn't really answer that question fully.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, I had two questions. The first one is, how far into the development cycle of the game were you guys into when you came into the project, pretty much? And the second one is, how did you go into getting that first job working with Saints Row 2 and then moving into Gearbox?
Yeah, so
what was the first question was what again? Sorry.
How far into the development cycle was?
We start immediately, pretty much. Well, we rolled off of Battleborn pretty much in 2016, and Borderlands had been in this like really, really early state of pre-production for a couple years. I think between 2015 to 2016 or something like that. Pretty much right when we rolled off of Battleborn, we were on it, and we were in pre-production. So we do a lot of like. We do a lot of stuff. We don't sit around and twiddle our fingers. We pretty much get straight to thinking like, okay, what are we going to need in this game? So like mantling and sliding was a thing that we knew we were going to need. So we went ahead and started doing recording sessions for things like that. The Ratches came on pretty early as well, as I demonstrated there in that video. So we got to work on prototyping things really quickly. I think I think most of Gearbox has been on this project for about 3 years. Which is not that long, considering that we switched engines and stuff like that, you know. And it's kind of interesting because I was thinking about this the other day. It's almost like every game that I work on is like an entire high school. You know, it's like going from freshman to senior all over again. This was about a 3.5 year thing, which is it's kind of interesting how that panned out. And for your second question, you asked how I got the job at Volition. So I honestly. Here's a cool piece of advice that Mark Kilborn gave me because Mark Kilborn and I used to, if you don't know him, he was a audio director over at Raven, and right now he's doing some freelance work and stuff. But he was a pretty big mentor for me really early on, and he actually sent me this job opening that was at Volition about a month before I was going to graduate, and I'd been applying to other places and not hearing anything, you know, and like these were like little bitty places, like made little tiny indie games and stuff, and like I couldn't get attention from anybody, and I kept, you know, I was firing off my resume in a bunch of places, but he sent me this listing for Volition, and it just says sound designer, and it didn't say it had any, you know, previous experience required or anything like that. So he told me to apply, and I was like, "This is stupid. These other little bitty companies don't even look at me. Why would Volition even give a shit?" You know. But I did apply. But Kilburn actually gave me a really cool piece of advice, and this is a piece of advice that you could all take with you today. He was like, "Hey, I know that you're discouraged and everything, but why don't you just email the audio directors of the company, just find out what their names are, go to the website, find the name, and in every video game company, it works very similarly. It's going to be the first initial and their last name at thecompany.com, or it's going to be vice versa. You know, it's going to be their full name and then their last name initial." And he said, just fire them an email and tell them you applied and that you're very interested in working for them. And I was like, all right, I'll do it. So I sent an email to email. I didn't even know it existed to anyone. At the time, it was the audio director, Dan Wentz at Volition. And in 5 minutes, I got a response just for doing that. And they were like, okay, yeah, like they hired me up. I did it. He basically, that's when he asked me to do that demo reel, and I was like, yeah, demo reel. I'll do a demo reel now. So it was a Friday that I got that email back from him. He's like, can you have a demo reel to us by Monday? And I just cranked it out this whole weekend. For that whole weekend, and I submitted it, and they're like, sure, let's do an on-site interview, or excuse me, let's do a phone interview. And I was like, oh gosh, I guess. All right, this is awesome. So I did a phone interview with them, and I don't think I've ever been as nervous ever since. But yeah, I did the phone interview, and then about a week or two later, I thought that it was over after that phone interview. But about a week or two later, they're like, hey, you want to fly out? Fly out and interview with us. So like, I was very lucky. Like, I was supposed to be graduating the day that I went and had my interview. So I just rolled right into that job. I was very, very, very lucky. And then with Gearbox, I was working at Volition for a little bit of time, and one of my buddies, Rayson Varner, and we were just super, super close friends. And he went down to Gearbox about 6 months into being at Volition, and about a year later, he hit me up and he was like, "Hey, we have an opening coming up. Like, are you interested?" And I was like, "No, not really. I really wasn't interested at all." Like, I naively thought Gearbox was going to be a side grade, sort of, and it wouldn't have made a big difference in my career at that point. I'm very glad that I did go. I was very smitten with Borderlands 1 whenever I saw it in my interview. It charmed the hell out of me singing that "Ain't No Rest for the Wicked" intro, if any of y'all remember that. And I played that, you know, a few months before it came out, and that was probably one of the things that really just pushed me over the edge. I'm like, this could be something special. This was not doing something that other games are doing. The whole looter shooter thing hadn't happened yet, and like loot mechanics in games were pretty much just RPG, like Diablo RPGs and stuff like that at that time. So I took the job, and yeah, I've just been there. I've been there for 10 years now, 12 years in the industry total.
Well, thank you. So which game did you choose for the demo reel?
What's that?
What game did you choose?
Yeah, actually, I did 2 demo reels for Volition, and the 2 demos that I did were, back then I did a BioShock one, and I did a Saints Row one. So I tried to keep it in the same family of stuff that they were doing, because obviously it needs to be sort of relevant and stuff, so yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hello.
Hey.
The boss Carnivora is awesome. The sound is awesome. How did you make it?
That was actually our Gearbox Studio Quebec team that did all that. So yeah, they actually handled a number of things in the game. They handled vehicles, and they handled all those Pandora maps that happen during Act 3, basically when you go back to Pandora. So Gearbox did the first few Pandora maps, and then you go to Promethea, you go to Eden 6, and then you go to Pandora again. Pretty much Gearbox Studio Quebec did all that, and I think it sounds awesome too. I don't know what they did though. Thank you.
Hello.
Hey.
I want to preface this question by saying I haven't known much info about the history of Borderlands, but the game that I play recently had an audio bug that was so loud, and they had to patch in a fix for it. Has there ever been a time in Borderlands history where there's been audio bugs that had to been patched that were either way too loud or any sound design that's been needing to be fixed in the future?
Yeah, and there are plenty of we try to patch as much as we can. We're going through some audio patch phases right now with stuff sort of like that. Mostly it's performance related and just missing when sounds get missing sometimes that we don't catch. On Borderlands 2 though, there was this boss battle that I worked on. It was a bunker boss. It's like this boss that flies around in a ship and stuff. And I finished the boss battle, and there's these turrets that you can shoot on its arm, and that's how you take it down essentially. Well, years and years later, after this game had been out for 6 years, I was watching watching these streamers that still play the game. There's this one named Killer6. They do farm runs where they play the same boss battle over and over again, hoping it's going to drop super rare loot. And I was watching this guy play, and he because he was super high level, he was I forgot the highest level you could be, and he had this gun, and he would shoot the turret so fast that it created this kind of sound, and I was like, oh my god, we ship with that. And then I was cruising through forums, and people were like, yeah, that's just the sound that it makes now whenever you get that high level. I was like, I did not test that at all. We did not test for that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Ooh, hi, Josh.
Hey.
I have one question for you from. It says, hey, Josh, from Twitch. Hey, Josh, it's Carson from SCAD. I know how amazing it is when you get that aha moment, when you finally nail that secret ingredient to make the sound work. Was there a moment you remember really being happy you figured out a sound?
Yeah, whenever I locked in the sounds for the Maliwan snipers and finally getting to use that system and feeling okay, I finally get how I can combine these different part audios, different parts together from disparate parts of the gun to slap together to create one new sound. I felt like that was my aha moment, the biggest aha moment I had on the game for sure.
That's awesome. Do you remember Carson from SCAD?
No.
Just say yes.
Oh, yes, I do know who he is.
There we go.
Yeah.
Well, Josh, thank you so much for being here. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give it up for Joshua Davidson. He's amazing. Isn't he amazing? Just so you guys know, at 12:30, we have Jason Brown coming out here talking about data-driven games. At 2 o'clock, we have Jacob Christopher talking about art creation pipelines for huge games. And of course, at 3:30, come back because these guys are all going to be up here, 6 grads. It's going to be a giant Borderlands day. Come back. Thanks for being here. Good night, everybody.